Hi, I'm Danielle, and welcome to This Enchanted House. So this channel is called This Enchanted House because I wanted to talk about basically things that interest me and how I make my life more enchanted and my house more enchanted. And it kind of was born out of this idea of aesthetic magic. And I have a whole video, it's like one of the first videos I did on it. Oh my god, I hate recommending my old videos at this point because I've actually gotten better about how I've done videos, but the ideas are there if you're curious about sort of the thesis of part of this channel. I've kind of been concentrating more on the aesthetic part and the home part and the decorating part, and I thought today I would do a little bit on the magic part. I got this really cool dress at the Oddities Expo. Once again, you want to check that video out, please do so. This is this great tarot dress, and tarot is a great example of aesthetic magic that works at an aesthetic level, and an aesthetic you can apply in different ways. So today we're going to talk about tarot and how it works and how to use it as an aesthetic magic. What is tarot? So tarot is a form of cartomancy, which is, divination using images on cards. Cartomancy develops sometime in the 14th century, really when playing cards develop in Europe. I know it's a very Eurocentric view. I don't actually know much about whether other cultures had playing cards or not. But for tarot's history, this is where it really begins, with cartomancy developing in Europe as people develop playing cards to play games, and then one of the games is obviously fortune-telling games. The tarot deck first appears in the 15th century, where it's mostly used as playing cards, as a game. It may have also been used for these fortune-telling games, but we really see it taken seriously as a divination practice not till the 18th century. So it's not like super ancient like some people claim. It does not come from like ancient Egypt or something like that. It's fairly modern, though though a lot of the pictures and the symbolism that we will talk about later do date back a lot later. The tarot is a particular deck that's divided into two major parts. The major arcana, which is 22 cards, which are referred to as the trump cards, which, if you are familiar with card games, usually kind of are the I win cards. And the minor arcana, which is 56 cards and actually makes up the basis for our modern day playing cards. So how does reading tarot as a divination tool work? Usually it involves a reader and a client, and the reader will lay out cards and will interpret the cards for the client. But there's a little more to it than that. So first off, if you watch a lot of debunking shows, especially debunking psychics, you'll hear the term cold read, and it's always kind of amusing to me where the debunker's like, they're just cold reading, it's obviously explainable. And it's like, if you have watched some of my other videos on magic is explainable 99% of the time. Magic doesn't lie in the explanation, it lies in the experience, and the experience of being cold read can be pretty intense and pretty interesting. And if you're unfamiliar with what a cold read is, it is where a person can read your mood and your reactions to things and use that to kind of get yes/no answers without actually asking you any questions. It's like looking at micro expressions, like does your face slightly grimace when something's mentioned? Do you light up? And it is a skill that people can learn, but it isn't like an exact science. It's not like just like lie detectors don't always work, neither does a cold read. So it isn't an explanation of what's happening, but just because you can explain it doesn't make it any less magic. So the other explanation comes from the work of psychiatrist Carl Jung, and just a disclaimer here, he's working in the beginning of the 20th century, and a lot of he comes from the same kind of school as Sigmund Freud, and a lot of their work's kind of been disproven or debunked, but it's still kind of, there are some applications, and if you look at, he was calling from all sorts of different sources, including anthropology and philosophy as well as science, so it's kind of a nice mix when we're talking, it works really well when we're talking about magic. But in particular, we're talking about Jung's collective unconscious. This is the idea that we as a society have this sort of collective unconscious of these ideas and archetypes that we use to represent things and symbols that we use, and it's not something we've ever like sat down and agreed upon. We just kind of all know it. There's things that cross cultures, obviously, but it's usually cross time and it can change. But so it's like the idea of the brave knight or the peaceful mother or the dark witch. These are all archetypes, and the tarot makes use of these. And when you're doing a tarot reading, you're telling a story, and the story depends on archetypes, and you're using that cold read to get, and actual just talking to your client to kind of put together a story of how the client is experiencing things and how coming up with an interpretation. So the pictures are sort of like a key that unlocks the story. So I thought today we'd just kind of do a sample reading, and I can show you kind of just how an interpretation works. Now obviously I'm not working with a client, so it's just me kind of interpreting the cards, but so let's see. So for the reading today, we are going to be using the Ethereal Visions deck by Matt Hughes. Like I'm going to talk about this later, but there's all sorts of decks out there with all sorts of art design. This is just one I really like. It's very pretty. I do have a lot of decks that are in this Art Nouveau style because it's one of my favorite styles. So another static thing is readers usually use a cloth that's for just reading tarot on. This is a very beautiful scarf I have with this sort of Celtic design on it. I have lots of decks and lots of cloths, and also tarot readers usually keep their decks someplace special, like a bag or a box, and they have a lot of those too. But so we're so we're going to put the deck out here, and I've already shuffled the deck to save some time for us here, but I will go ahead and cut it in a second here, and we're going to ask it a question. And I think our question is going to be kind of a simple, general, hey, what's going on today? The other thing to know about this deck is that it actually has 2 extra cards on top of it. Is a tarot deck and it follows its structure, but it has 2 cards beyond the world, and if they come up, we'll talk about them. If not, you can just look this deck up online and see what I'm talking about. But so for the first thing for reading is you have to have a question, and it can be, hey, what do you want to tell me, tarot cards? So we're going to just let the tarot cards talk to us today and give us whatever message they think we need to hear. It may be whatever someone out there needs to hear. It might be what I need to hear. But we're going to let them kind of do the talking today. I'm just doing a simple three card spread where we talk about, it's going to be what came, what is, and what will come. I didn't talk about this so much when we were talking about how tarot works, but when we talk about divination, people think, oh, it's telling the future. But really, divination is about looking at the present. And you can make a best guess about the future. And you don't need tarot cards to do that. That's what economists do and environmental scientists do. They make best guess predictions based on the data they have. And in science, it's very different. It's very analytical, and you compile lots of data to come up with this. This is more spiritual, psychological version of it, but it's sort of the same concept. No one can predict the future, but we can make best guesses, and we're going to make a best guess. This last card will be sort of help us make that best guess based on what's in these 2 cards. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the deck and say, hey, they just want to know what you want to tell us today. So I'm going to do that. I always do a 3 cut. Okay, so what has come? Turn it around. I don't do reversals because when I shuffle cards, I tend to somehow manage to get them all to face the same way. So it's either they're all upside down or they're all right side up. So what has come, what is, and what will be. So first up is we have Page of Wands. This is from the Minor Arcana. There are 4 suits, cups, wands, swords, and pentacles, and they correspond to the suits that you see in modern day playing cards. So pentacles is diamonds, wands is clubs. So wands in general usually have to do with work or like projects, or they're like sort of the hands-on of the decks. They're sort of the working class of the deck. So and then page is similar to jack. Usually there's 2 actually in tarot. There's 2 sort of cards that kind of are analogous to a jack card in a regular deck. That is the page and the knight. They've kind of been combined into one in normal decks, but they're part of the court cards, so they tend to have more importance. So Page of Wands sort of represents a beginning, but it also represents this sort of because pages tend to represent youth in general as opposed to experience, but it represents a beginning. In terms of wands, we're thinking of things like creativity, exploration, setting out on a journey. Moving over to pentacles. Pentacles usually have to do with finances and wealth. They kind of represent money. So these kind of go together in that sense. The 3 pentacles represents collaboration or coming together, and that success comes from working with other people. And finally, in our what will be, we have strength, and strength is a trump card. It is one of the major arcana, and it represents strength. It is the ability to overcome, the ability to persevere, and to ultimately succeed. And so we've got these kind of 3 ideas, and they kind of relate to each other. And as I kind of look at it, I kind of get the idea of, so we've got this enthusiasm and creativity, and maybe people who are, a little outside the norm right now, who are a little different, but are, want to explore, and that right now you want to come together with other people like you, and who are creative and interesting and fun, and that there's a lot of success to be found there when you work with other people and you collaborate with other people and you kind of find your tribe, as it were. And when you do that, you come out with strength. You come out stronger for it. You come out more able to complete your goals and persevere through times that might seem tough. And so, yeah, that's sort of how it works. You kind of look at each card individually, how they relate to each other. Suits have meanings, trumps have meanings, and you kind of put the story together. So the message from this reading is there's strength in numbers and finding your tribe and coming together. So I hope maybe if you're watching this was maybe the message you were looking for. It kind of speaks to me a little bit on my own personal journey, and so let's talk about tarot some more. So like I mentioned earlier, though the tarot cards themselves are relatively new in human history, a lot of the symbols on them are symbols that we see throughout time and fall in that archetype category. Things like the sun and the moon and star, the devil. And when you're doing magic, you're working on a symbolic level. You're working on this level of, I'm working in the level of ideas and thoughts, and I want to interpret them in a meaningful manner, which is where aesthetic magic comes in. Where, remember, I've talked about aesthetic being a visual language, or even a sensory language, where aesthetic can be sight, it can be smell, it can be sound, it can be all the senses. For tarot, it's visual, so we're going to concentrate on visual today. There's 2 ways that witches and other magical practitioners use tarot cards. besides just divination. The first is as a meditative and spiritual tool. The major arcana often is seen as a representation of a journey, starting with the Fool, to, you know, who is the seeker, who's just starting, who doesn't really know anything, and who's learning. The tarot represents a path through all sorts of tests and stages of knowledge, all the way up to the world, which is sort of, you know, universal knowledge. And so many, both tarot readers and people who may not necessarily read, but will use the tarot as a meditative journey, and you contemplate the meaning of each card and how it represents this a step in this journey, and what it represents as this collective unconscious, and how it relates to the world. So that's one way. The other way, that as a witch and as someone who practices magic, might use tarot is in spellcasting. And spellcasting is really its own topic, but one part of spellcasting is representing your intentions in the spell. So that could be something, you know, having some symbolic representation somewhere in your spell. And tarot is a really kind of great shortcut way to do that. And since all the cards have different meanings, you just pick a card that has the meaning of the spell you're working on. So for instance, I might, if I was doing a spell to find a romantic partner, I might use the Two of Cups to represent that. Or if I was looking for success at a job interview, I might use the Seven of Wands. So those are some of the options that you can use for when you are trying to cast spells. So let's talk about tarot as aesthetic magic. As I've talked about before, aesthetic magic is surrounding yourself with aesthetics that reflect your personality, your morals, your beliefs, your activities, your lifestyle. I suggest also, if you want to check out my video, aesthetic, lifestyle, genre, and subculture, the kind of where I talk more about where aesthetic comes from and how it applies and the cross between all those. I highly recommend it. So lately, tarot's kind of taken it on its own life as sort of an art form, and you can incorporate these tarot symbols in lots of different ways. So the first example is, for the reading today, I used the Ethereal Visions deck. There are tons of decks out there and tons of art styles and tons of aesthetics that reinterpret these symbols and this sort of set these sort of set archetypes in all sorts of different styles. So you can use that tarot symbology combined with your own personal aesthetic. So for instance, most of my decks are kind of in this Art Nouveau style because that's one of my really favorite styles. But there are more traditional ones that Rough Rider way, more ones that towards Celtic designs or classical Greek and Roman designs, and you can experiment with all of them. There are also what are called oracle decks, which use which are used in cartomancy, but do not necessarily follow the structure of a traditional tarot deck. For instance, today I also have with me my Bestiaria Oracle, which is part of my Atolls series, the illustrated Bestiaria came with this book. So, and there's also you have the option of just using playing cards, which Bicycle has made all sorts of. There's a steampunk one, a dragon themed one, the Stargazer one, Warrior Horse. If you're doing divination and you want to use a specific style, there's also these. But tarot can be a great aesthetic just to incorporate into your everyday life. You can, once again, you have with all those different decks, it's not unusual to see people use those just as art in their house, and to get some artists even sell prints of their tarot cards that they've done, or you can pick out particular cards and frame them and put them in a display. Obviously fashion, I got this dress recently, but also I've seen lots of people use tarot in jewelry, or earrings. So you can incorporate it all over, and even in decor, like I said, this I got, if you watch my Spirit Halloween haul, this is Spirit Halloween sells, I think they sell these every year. They're just banners with tarot cards on them, and you can hang them up and decorate your space. But if you want to learn more on doing tarot, there's lots of different ways. If you're interested in being a reader and working with people, I highly recommend either taking classes or working with someone who already is a professional reader, because there's a lot involved on the business side of things that you can only learn kind of by doing or working with someone who is doing. But if you're just looking to incorporate tarot into your personal aesthetics and your personal magics and your personal practices, there are some, you can look for classes online, and once again you can work with a professional reader, or there's a lot of great books out there, and the two I recommend, there's an old one and a new one. The old one is Tarot for Beginners by P. Scott Hollander, from Llewellyn. I always want to pronounce it Llewellyn Publishing, which is a big, I don't know if this is the current cover. This is like my copy from the 90s. I really like it because this is just a basic, straightforward, these are the cards, this is how you lay them out. It's a very technical book. And then the other one, it's a more recent book that I really love, is Kitchen Table Tarot by Melissa Sanova, which is also published by Llewellyn. She's a little more personable. She talks kind of more about how you incorporate personally. And this is also just a really good book. Going forward, I hope the easiest is to maybe grab a book, grab a deck, and just play around and experiment. I know that there's people out there who say, oh, you can only be gifted a deck. No, that's not how it works. It's great when you are gifted a deck, but you can go out and if you see a deck that speaks to you, then get it. And practice and play around. Use it for meditation. Use it, and you'll start to develop your own interpretation and your own connection and your own way of looking at the cards. So tarot, what do you think? Do you have questions, concerns? What do you do with your tarot cards? What's your favorite deck? Post me comments below. If you like this video, please give it a like. Please check out my other videos. If you like what you see here, please subscribe for the latest and the greatest. I have links below to my Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter if you want to connect on social media. I hope you have an enchanted day, and I'll see you next time. Bye!